Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Ukrainian show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and we have our wonderful panel, as usual, Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan. Glad to have you here.
Hey,
Hello.
glad to be here.
And our own Ivan Kucherenko from Kiev, Ukraine. Welcome to the show, Ivan.
Hello, Sasha. Hello,
Hello.
Jonathan. Hi, everyone.
Let's start with the movies that you've prepared for us for today. Could we
Yeah,
start with
let's
that?
start with it.
Thanks to those still living in the Middle Ages, more and more terms from history textbooks are in our news again. We're back to discussing war crimes, tribunals, and reparations. Current trends in reparations and what should happen in order for Russia to pay for everything it has done in this explanatory video from Bob. Reparations are compensations made as a result of an international offense. International institutions or peace treaty usually determine how much and when to pay them. Germany's reparations after World War I was a trendsetter. It took them more than 90 years to pay it off completely. The same thing happened after World War II, and not so long ago, Iraq also paid reparations for the occupation of Kuwait between 1990 to 91. The terms for the payments were under UN Security Council resolutions. That's why the UN General Assembly has already adopted a resolution that calls for war reparations payments to Ukraine and the mechanisms for paying of these reparations by Russia. Up to now, $350 billion have been counted. Unfortunately, these resolutions are not yet legally binding. They simply show that the world is on Ukraine's side. Russia once again demonstrated its disdain for international law and declared that it would not pay anything. Russia's deputy ambassador Vasily Nebenzia called the document legally worthless, and Putin's press secretary thinks that the resolution formalizes the robbery of their gold and currency reserves. Yes, it is the $300 billion of frozen international currency reserves of Russia that are the first contender for covering damages. In theory, it's simple. EU countries transfer frozen assets to Ukraine, but under international law, they have immunity that protects them from confiscation. It is very complicated to legally withdraw this money and other assets of the oligarchs. Legal jurisprudence is required to transfer the money to Ukraine. Such a decision could be made by the International Criminal Court in The Hague. However, for the court to initiate the case, a resolution of the UN Security Council is necessary, and the Russian Federation, being a permanent member of the Council, will naturally veto this decision. So far, the European Parliament has only adopted a resolution on creating a special tribunal for Putin and Lukashenko and has already recognized Russia as a sponsor of terrorism. Small win, but still nice. How will reparations affect the Russian economy? Who cares? But let's be honest, the international community does recognize the need for reparations, but with caution. The deliberate humiliation and financial ruin of the aggressor, as was the case with Germany after World War I, will lead to new conflicts. Confiscating their reserves will not have an immediate negative impact on Russia, but their freezing already causes inflation. And soon a steady increase in prices will be felt by every housewife while buying a loaf of bread that costs half of her pension. But legally, the easiest option to make Russia pay is to change the political leadership in Russia and/or Russia admitting defeat in the war. That is exactly what Ukraine is working on with the support of its partners.
Well, very good video, and this is something what is being discussed now more and more in the international organizations, and I think one way or another that will be solved in favor of Ukraine. And in the meantime, something interesting is happening. Ivan, maybe you know more about it, because what I've heard in the last few hours, actually, that Ukrainians are probing the front lines in very different directions. And it's not like immediate counteroffensive, an attack or something like this, but there are a lot of activities that show that they are trying to find some weaknesses in the Russian front lines. Is that what you hear as well?
Yeah, I've also heard that during last few days, Ukraine actually started to prepare the attack, and before Ukraine will be able to attack on different directions. I hope it would be more than two of them. Our armed forces have to find the weaknesses in the Russian defense, obviously, and so now they're investigating the defense line, attacking, and trying to find the best possible um place to strike with all available power. So we all waiting for this strike, and I hope that it will begin in a few next days, maybe.
My thinking is different. They are familiar and they know very well all positions of Russian defenders. So this is not to find the weakest link. In my opinion, this is to disorient enemy, to show that they are prepared to strike in many different directions. I've heard about 12 points of attack, and actually 3 of these points are in Russian territory, namely Kursk, Belgorod, and Rostov area. Okay, so that shows the scope and magnitude of Ukrainian offensive, what is coming. Jonathan, what do you think of this strategy?
Well, I tend to agree with you on that, Sasha, because this is especially the probes near Kursk and other places. This is called in military parlance reconnaissance in force. So they are probes, but they are strong probes to see if they can provoke a reaction, and it's strong enough that it causes the Russians to react if they can. And also, politically it serves a purpose too, in that it satisfies those who are looking for action on the part of Ukraine. It's okay. We're doing this. We're not just sitting idle. We are actively probing, which is what any good, skilled military would do. And so that should not come as a surprise. So what they're doing is they're gathering information with these various reconnaissance probes and keeping the Russians off balance. Keep them off balance, force them to react, and just like a skilled boxer, looking, so okay, where do I want to put my main punch? They still have a main punch, and that
Make them afraid.
Make them afraid. Okay, when's the big punch coming? When is he going to throw that big punch that's designed to knock us out? And they haven't touched yet. They haven't touched the Crimea. And they're keeping the Russians nervous. The Russians are still busily trying to fortify their fixed defenses, which aren't really going to do them any good if the supplies are cut off from the Crimea. So they're acting like a modern day version of Muhammad Ali, the greatest professional boxer. He's dancing and he's throwing these little jabs and forcing his opponent to react. And when they least expect it, they'll throw the main punch. And so I think it's a very encouraging sign. It's very intelligent actions on the part of the Ukrainian armed forces. They aren't just simply blundering ahead, hoping to wear the Russians down with main force, but and the Russians have already done a good job of wearing themselves out. So now the Ukrainians are simply acting like skilled boxers, probing for weakness, seeing what the reaction is, and as their logistics continue to build up, they will have the capability by the early summer, I would guess, to throw that main punch. Now, as a historical parallel, when the Germans in 1943 It was their last major offensive on the Eastern Front, Operation Citadel. This is right around the Kursk-Prokhorovka area.
Yeah.
And the historical military analysts said, had the Germans launched their offensive, their Citadel offensive, in May of 1943, then it would have had a much better chance of success. June was made more problematic, and in retrospect, launching an offensive in July was considered suicide, and that's when the Germans launched their offensive. They launched it in July when the Russians were fully prepared, and you had huge tank battles. But essentially the Germans spent the last of their serious offensive capability in that Kursk offensive. But probing Kursk has great historical significance for the Russians. So the Ukrainians made sure that the Russians were paying attention. Hey, we're probing Kursk. So,
Jonathan, but you see, it was very different for Russians to defend Kursk and prepare their counterattack eventually, because they were on their own territory. So they knew the territory so well, and they were defending their territory. So now take today, when let's see Kherson and Zaporozhye, for example, these two, okay? Where are they headquartering their army and their generals and officers? And so they have to chase Ukrainians from their homes and take their dwellings by force. So they would put Ukrainians out on the street and themselves take their apartments or houses or everything else.
It's not a very good public look for the Russians.
Ivan, what's your opinion?
I think that the most important in all these upcoming Ukrainian attack is that Russians are really afraid. Probably they're so afraid that Russian pilots started to bomb Russian cities. You've heard
they were bombing.
probably about,
It's the military equivalent of wetting their own pants.
For falling accidentally from a Russian military airplane to Belgorod, a big bomb, and it falls accidentally from the plane. I think that pilot was really afraid of upcoming Ukrainian attacks, that he
maybe
pushed
he was drunk.
I don't know. As always, I've got a short video of that bomb actually blowing in Belgorod. We can look through it now. And the funniest, Mark, can you launch the video, please?
I couldn't believe when I saw it. Oh my God.
Yeah. And the funniest, look at that video. You've seen a car which was driving a road, and that bomb exploded. And as usual, Russian officials said that they had no victims of this explosion. No victims. No one was hurted. And you've seen that car actually, which was
yeah. Oh, he had a story to tell.
Maybe it was driven by autopilot. It was something like a robotic car from Skolkovo, but Russian officials said that no one was hurted and no victims.
It's like Napoleon said: never interfere with an opponent who is in the process of destroying himself.
Yeah,
you just let the Russians be the Russians.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Were there any tries of Russians to say that it was Ukrainians actually who bombed Belgorod?
It's really interesting, but they confirmed that it was an accident by a Russian airplane. So it becomes really interesting that Russians are started to admit that some strikes are being either managed by Ukraine, like the strike on Crimean bridge Kerch Bridge because they accused the head of Ukrainian defense intelligence, Kirill Budanov, for that strike. And so they admitted that Ukraine was able to strike the Crimean bridge, which was protected more than any place in the world. And the Russian before that said that no one will be able to strike the Crimean bridge. It's so well protected in the air, on land, in sea, underwater. No one can strike the Crimean bridge.
Ivan, but trucks who brought that to Crimean bridge, they came from Russian territory.
Yeah,
How
obviously.
they explain that?
But they've accused head of Ukrainian defense intelligence and even issued a warrant for arrest him by Moscow court. So he said that it's very pleasant for him to understand that Russia accepts his achievements. So he will work even better with such level of motivation. And I think that the next thing will be that Russia will admit that the Moscow cruiser was sunk down by Ukrainian missiles.
Yeah.
It was not an accident. So waiting for that, maybe.
No, Russians explained that there was a huge fire on a ship, and because of the fire, they had to take it back to the Sevastopol. And then something happened on its way to Sevastopol, it went all the way down.
Just a comedy of errors.
In the wrong place.
I would like to mention something that one of the Putin's conditions for the peace with Ukraine is to how he said it, it was in Russian, he said that you have to calculate the geopolitical reality, meaning that whatever they grabbed should remain.
Accept the new geopolitical reality. Yeah.
I think that this fool does not even understand what he's talking about. The political reality today is very different than before the beginning of the war. Today's political reality is that the Finland and soon Sweden are members of NATO. And this is 1,000 kilometers of forces. And Finland is taking the huge steps to modernize its army, which is strong even today, but they want to make it yet much stronger. They want to bring NATO forces and American forces in, and they're getting F-35 fighter jets and so on. Now, now the Poland and Romania, they're getting huge 20,000 strong US only battalions, which will be ready. It's completely autonomous. It's like an army. Okay, you say 20,000,
right.
But 20,000 well-trained and equipped soldiers, it's like a 200,000 strong Russian army, maybe even stronger. Now, this is in Europe. Now, Ukraine is becoming, one way or another, is becoming part of NATO. And that's not all. Now, on the south, there's a Turkish and Azerbaijani forces that is now one army under one command, and they're completely, and the Turkish army always was very strong, but now it's becoming way much stronger, and Americans are very cooperative now dealing with Turkey because they understand that after all, it's not a country, and they have to, whatever disagreements they have major disagreements, I think they had because Turkey was purchasing C-400 Russian systems, and Americans were upset about it. But Russian fools, what they did, they delivered C-400, but without certain capabilities which they wanted to keep secrets from Turkey as another country. And so they still have the C-400, but they're very, very limited capabilities. And now Turkey is back to US, asking them to bring them Patriot systems and bring them all the rest, which they will. So now it's Turkey and Azerbaijan in the south. So the Russia is now, at least European part of Russia, is completely encircled by NATO or NATO-friendly powers. This is with geopolitical reality.
The geopolitical reality, in effect, is that Putin has managed to put himself in a worse position than he was before the war.
Much
Yes,
worse.
he has lengthened the amount of enemy territory that he has to deal with by over 800 miles. Yeah, he never didn't have a hostile Finland on his border before. Now he
Yeah.
does. And and as you pointed out, all of those countries in the east nearest to Russia are not only reinforcing, but they are bringing up the ballistic missile defense systems. You will eventually have those. You will have the beginnings, the foundation of what I've been recommending, that NATO and the U.S. That they join together. They cooperate to create eventually what should become a global ballistic missile defense system, designed to, in the end, totally neutralize the Russian nuclear arsenal, which, you remember, in their view, is what makes them a great power. Yeltsin himself had said it back in 1994. The only reason Russia is considered a great power is because its armed forces have nuclear weapons.
But he was right.
That told you all you needed to know about the Russian perspective, and it still holds true today. There is nothing that has changed about that perspective. So, these are very positive developments for Ukraine in the long term. The key is reparations and rebuilding and so forth. We can get through the legal niceties and complications, bypass the opposition of Russia in the Security Council, which legally you could do because, as you yourself pointed out, that applied to the former Soviet Union. The former Soviet Union no longer exists because that was the original member of the Security Council. The Russian Federation, not so much. Uh, there is a legal fiction which is going on here, which needs to be disproven and refuted in court of international law, and then we can proceed with getting the reparations and assets to Ukraine, which is necessary for them to rebuild. And they've got a big challenge on their own. Once they get all these reparations, to put them to the best possible use. And I realize, as some people point out, that there's corruption in Ukraine. Well, oh wow, what a big surprise! Where is there not corruption to some degree in virtually every country? Certainly in the United States can't accuse anybody with clean hands of saying, "Oh, we don't have any corruption in our country." Wrong. Yeah, so everyone has to approach this with a certain degree of humility, that yes, we
Absolutely.
do have done some things wrong, but we intend to get it right with Ukraine.
And remember that the Ukrainian corruption is not something what's coming of the portions of Ukraine that was under Poland or Austro-Hungarian Empire. No, it's coming from Russia, and Russia got it from Asia. But at the same time, I want to tell you that in Genghis Khan time, in Mongols, there was much less corruption than in today's Russia. So Russia actually got some ideas from Mongols and from Asia, but it brought it to incredible height. And Russia is basically a cancer on a world way of life. The everything from civilization point of view, Russia is incredible. The well, as Reagan said, the better you could not say the evil empire. That's exactly what it is. But it's no longer empire. It's evil,
Right.
but not empire. It's God.
It just reminds me of that old joke during the Soviet era, where, and this was within the Soviet Union, where one Soviet worker is saying to the other, we must be the richest country in the world. He says, why do you say that? He said, well, here we've been stealing from the state for 60 years, and still there's something left to steal.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. And listen, I was born in Soviet Union and spent first about 20 years of my life. But at least, of course, I saw everything was going on. I have a family, I had friends, and so on. So I know enough what was then. But what's today is 500 times worse, really. Because at least at that time, really, I'm talking about, let's see, the end of 60s, 70s, uh, everybody was relatively poor compared to today's standards, especially in the West. Everybody was poor, I would say. Some people were a little bit better than others, but most of them were poor. So at least they were just trying to survive, not so much to steal as to enrich themselves, because you could not do anything with the money in that time in the Soviet Union. What could you do? Could you buy an apartment? No, you have to stay in line for 20 years. Could you buy a car, a Volga or Lada or something? No, you have to wait for the 12 years until you get a car. Could go maybe on a cruise around the Europe, for example. No, you couldn't, because you would need visas for every country that you would visit. But this is not the most important thing. You would need exit visa from Soviet Union to take a train from let's see, Kiev or Odessa. Let's see, you have a train to Bratislava, for example. You need exit visa to go to friendly Slovakia, or at that time Czechoslovakia country. You couldn't do it without exit visa. And to do the exit visa, you need to go around and take characteristics from your school or your place of work, and a recommendation from the party officials that I'm a good law-abiding citizen, that I love a Communist Party and all that stuff. Ivan, you of course don't remember that because of your age, but trust me, that was exactly thing, and maybe you heard it from.
I've almost became a pioneer.
Oh,
Actually.
okay.
You did? Oh my!
Yeah, but then the Soviet Union collapsed, and it was no more pioneer organization. But I was how to call it in English, Октябренок, October. It's like
It was before the
Yeah.
pioneer.
before pioneers, some kind of Hitler-Jungen organization.
It's
Soviet.
yeah.
You know, all this reminds me of one of the stories or jokes that President Reagan told, where this one worker had signed up to buy a car, and he went through all the paperwork, and he says, and they said, he presented to the bureaucrat, and he said that in okay, 10 years from now you can pick up your car on this date. And the worker asks, is it morning or afternoon? Is it morning, afternoon? What difference does it make? And the man replied, well, the plumber's coming in the morning.
That's a good one.
So it got a big laugh from the American audience, even though but he was trying to explain, through jokes, and jokes from within the Soviet Union, that what the situation really was. And the funny thing, other thing was that the Soviets like to point out that the Americans had a poverty level. Yeah,
Yes.
that's true. But the poverty, what Americans consider poverty, they measured it, was a figure well above the average Soviet wage. It is, in essence, poverty to the Americans means, and this is true, poverty to the Americans means you can't afford luxuries. Yeah, you
That's
can
right.
afford the necessities,
But
but
you
you
can
just can't afford.
sustain your
You,
certain
you can
level
sustain
of
your
life.
life. You can
Yeah.
sustain your life. You're not in danger of starvation, of whatever. Poverty to the Americans, that's sort of a function of how, I must admit, how spoiled we have become as a country. Our concept of poverty, completely different. And the and people from other countries who come to visit America, they're just absolutely, because we are completely unaware of, as a people of, and it has to be visibly brought home to us, and made visible, and you have to shout practically to get the Americans to pay attention as to what poverty really means. We have a vague idea as a people of what that's like. I mean, but right after World War II, when right after World War II, when we had been going through restrictions and rationing and all that stuff, that's the closest we ever came to poverty or deprivation. And right after World War II, when we were able to convert our war machine to producing consumer goods, we did so with a vengeance. And right after World War II, America went shopping. All these consumer goods and all this food. And if you've ever, And if you go to, and it's still true, if you go to an American restaurant, any American restaurant, you get a lot more food than that would be served. That is a reaction. That's a historical reaction to the Great Depression and to World War II rationing. It's something unconscious which we do. We basically said as a people, we're never going to experience this again. And so they made sure of it. And so now, of course, many years later, we think that's normal. No, it's not. It's not normal to have so much. And that's one of the great failings that we as Americans just don't appreciate the historical context from which we're coming. And we have so much, and we think nothing of giving the stuff to other people because we just have more than we can use. So
Absolutely, yeah.
and so it's only right that we should help Ukraine.
It's America is a country of plenty, and I wish that Ukraine soon, let's see, in 5 years, will become same.
I think it's entirely possible. You know,
I'm
but
strong
what they need
believer.
is peace. What they need is peace and
Absolutely.
stability and be left alone by the
And they
Russians.
have to be left alone, and they have to join all democratic institutions of European Union, NATO, and they have to become what they were through the history before this horrible traitor Bogdan Khmelnytsky, who was not even Ukrainian, he was Polish. Aristocrat who was mad at his king, and he decided to take all this territory of Ukraine and deliver it to Russian Tsar. But these things will be repaired very soon. I was in Kiev about 10 years last time, about 10 years ago, 11, 2012, and the Kiev was. It's hard to describe. It's a diamond. It's a diamond of Eastern Europe. There was nothing, no city, including Moscow or even St. Petersburg. Nothing can touch Kiev. What a beautiful place. And there are natural walls, center of Kiev and the Dnieper River. It's all this Krishchatik. This is really fantastic. And I think that it will be a part of a free Ukraine, and it will be an incredible city where there will be a lot of tourists going on to see it. And actually, all these programs with Ivan, you probably saw the Gordon with certain people that he's taken interview from, and they're just walking the streets of Kiev, even today when there's a war and so on, and it's so peaceful and so beautiful. Well, with that, I would like to finish our today's program. Thank you so much for participating, and we'll see you on Tuesday, same place, same time. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.